it's Nikki here. I'm here today to do my Book of the Month review for the book, for the Portable Veblen by Elizabeth McKenzie. This was kind of a late announcement. I got the book a little bit late, so I crunched it out in a couple weeks, and here I am to do the review. I've also decided that I'm going to switch up my setup for my reviews a little bit. I've just restructured it a bit, hopefully to make it a little bit more accessible for everybody that's interested. I am now going to do a spoiler-free portion followed by a spoiler portion, so if you are wanting to stay tuned in after I give my rating, I will discuss some spoilery things from the book that either bugged me or I was interested in, and then I'll touch base with some Book of the Month questions. So this book is the story of a couple kind of, I believe, in their mid-30s, and they are newly engaged, and it's described kind of as like wacky family and life issues that come up leading up to their marriage, and the synopsis, I believe, ends with like, will they get married? So it's a contemporary, it's, after reading it, I consider it like kind of humor, kind of hard-hitting. Sometimes I wanted to laugh, sometimes it was very serious subject matter that they were talking with, and the book itself had very serious undertones. It was a very interesting read. Within this book, you mostly follow Veblen, who is our main female protagonist, and then you also will follow Paul, who is her fiance, and I would consider him kind of the main male protagonist in the novel. Overall, I found this to be a quirky book that had some really interesting characters and some very strange story arcs. And that's all I'm really going to say, kind of to summarize and start this off. I will move into my likes and dislikes now. I'm still keeping 3 likes, 3 dislikes, just to give you an idea about the books. And as always, I start with my 3 likes, the first of which is Veblen herself. I really enjoyed her character. She was intelligent, she was quirky, she was very thoughtful. You spent a lot of time in her deep thought. Although sometimes you were wading through it, but a lot of it I found to be very relatable as I found her overall character to be. My second like is I liked Paul's story arc. I didn't care for Paul himself, but his story arc was really interesting. And my third like is all of the character growth that happened in the novel. All of the characters, without exception, do experience character growth in this book, and I really appreciated that because even the side characters weren't immune. I'll move on to my dislikes, the first of 3 being the pacing. I found it a bit odd. In my summary, I kind of mentioned that sometimes I wanted to laugh and sometimes I found it to be very serious, and with that, I found the pacing to be a little bit choppy. Not everybody, I think, will feel like this. Parts of it I really enjoyed, and then parts of it the pacing pulled me out, because not only were you switching perspectives, but you were kind of like switching perspectives and then like jumping forward and backward in people's memories, and it got to be very confusing if you weren't aware that the time jump happened. And I know it happened multiple times to me where I was like, wait, what? And it pulled me out of the story a lot. When that happened, it did pull me out of the story, and it decreased my overall enjoyment of it. My second dislike is the connection between Veblen and Paul. You miss a lot of the courtship. The book starts at the engagement proposal, and I just found it very difficult to feel the connection between them. Like, it was there and they talked about it, but I didn't feel like that connection was there, like in their actions and in their thoughts. And my third dislike was the overall writing style. Some of it I really enjoyed. Some of it however, I found to be like very, very wordy and written in such a way that made it hard for me to follow. And not everybody will likely find it this way, but I just found the writing style to be particularly unique and not something I was used to. And so there were certain points in the book where that did pull me out and lessened my enjoyment. Being said, I am all done with my likes and dislikes, and I will move on to my characters. First character I'm going to talk about is Veblen. I mentioned her in my likes. She is intelligent, she is thoughtful, she is quirky, and I found her to be very relatable. I really, really enjoyed the parts from Veblen's point of view because of these things, and I found her to be very interesting to read. Then I'll move on to Paul. He is a neurologist, specifically in medical research, and all the parts of his character like separately make me think that he'd be a very interesting read, but the way they came together in the book just made the character very hard for me to connect with, and I just didn't enjoy reading him. There was a lot of places where I really disliked him, and if you were supposed to dislike him, like, good on the author, but I found zero redeeming qualities in him for a long time in this book, and that made it very hard for me to get into because it's supposed to be about these people getting married, and I was not getting the romance connection, largely because of my dislike of him. And then there were a lot of side characters here. Some of them were really interesting, and some of them were just really nutty, and I didn't really enjoy them that much, and some of them drove me absolutely batshit crazy. And by the time I finished writing this out, I realized the only reason I finished the book was because I really liked Veblen. And that's all I really have to say about the characters. Like, they're quirky and flawed, which I usually really, really like, but there were just certain aspects of the characters themselves that made it really hard for me to connect with them or empathize with them. And unfortunately, it did impact my overall enjoyment of the book. With this being said, this is kind of the end of my spoiler-free portion of the video. My overall rating for this book is a 3 out of 5. I was debating 2.5, but honestly, I liked Paul's character arc a lot. I liked Veblen immensely, and even though overall, I feel like the dislikes weighed heavily on my enjoyment of this book, the two things that I liked the most, plus just kind of the overall plot of the book itself, pulled me through to the end of this book, like I said, letting me give this a 3 out of 5. It isn't the best book I've read. I probably won't read it again, but if a quirky kind of humor / serious contemporary is something that you think you'd enjoy, I would definitely give it a chance. It's very weird, it's very odd. With that, I will move into the spoiler section of this video. So the spoiler portion of the video, I will go over my book of the month questions, and then I will talk and or rant about the spoilery things in the book that I want to talk about. So I did 6 questions this month. I've been kind of fluctuating, but this is what it is this month. My first question is, what is your initial reaction to the novel? And I would have to say, after reading kind of the first 3 chapters, I was really curious. I was really intrigued because I liked Veblen. And the first chapter, honestly, doesn't grab you the way I typically like books to grab me. But because you're in Veblen's thoughts for part of it, I was very intrigued by her by the end of the first chapter, and that made me want to continue on. My second question is, what is your favorite chapter and or scene? I think it was all in the same chapter, but I really enjoyed the end of Paul's story arc where he acts out and becomes a whistleblower for the company that had until then been sponsoring him and giving him the money required for his research. And when he found out that they were trying to push his medical device out without proper testing by using a bunch of loopholes, and he got super angry at them. I loved kind of like the meltdown and then rebellion that he ended up doing. And yeah, it was easily like one of the most interesting parts of the book, and I loved it because it really changed my mind about Paul overall. My third question is, how did the characters change throughout the book? In this one, all of the characters grew, even the side characters, with the exception of maybe like one. All of them grew in terms of their moral character, the way they saw the world, the way they saw their family members. And I really enjoyed that. Like, I've never had a book where that many characters developed at such different ranges, and it all happened very effectively just by what was happening in the book, and that was really enjoyable. Specifically with Veblen and Paul, I liked the way they grew and became more themselves and less defined by their family. And I'm not saying that their family still isn't part of their life and part of their identity, but it isn't wrapped up in the bulk of it. By the end, Veblen really seems to have like gotten out from under her mother's thumb, where she still seems to be at the beginning. And Paul kind of makes peace with his brother and his parents, and that allows him to get rid of a lot of anger and move forward with his life. And it was really nice to see that. My fourth question is, how did you feel about the ending of the book? I was totally on board until Paul came out of a coma, had negligible, if any, brain damage, and bones that were, he could still kind of like maneuver easily, and like, it's kind of like that too good to be true given what happened situation, and I hate those. I like when the consequences feel more real. Like, I get that happens sometimes, but it just felt too convenient in the book. And along with that, I also didn't like Cloris's arc. Like, yeah, I kind of wanted something bad to happen to her, but I wanted her to get charged for hitting Paul with a car, and then for her company to be under investigation for the things they were doing to push it forward. But instead, Paul heals without any wound, like without any lasting wounds. Cloris gets hit in the head by the device, by her child, and then ends up having like some pretty serious brain damage. And I just thought that was dumb, just the way it was set up. I know it's a comment on like what kind of people they are and like the situation at large between them before this, but it felt too convenient, it felt too tidy, and I just didn't enjoy that aspect of it. But I was on board right up until he woke up, so most of the ending I enjoyed. And then everything after they finished talking about the injuries was really interesting too. And then 5, would you read another book by this author? I would definitely give it a shot. I'm not someone who likes to discard an author based on a single read. Sometimes I could just be not the right audience for it. I think I was just outside of the right audience for this book because there are parts of it I did enjoy and parts that I didn't. And maybe it's just the reading mood I'm in, and at another time I would have enjoyed it more. But based on the things I enjoyed about it, if this author had another book whose plot I felt like I could really get behind, I would definitely give it another shot. And then 6. Does this book remind you of any other books? And honestly, this one doesn't. I haven't read a lot of books that have this feel to it, so I'm going to turn this question to you guys in the comments below. If you have read anything else by this author or anything else that feels like this book, let me know. Give me your recommendations and I'll give them a shot if I can find them. And that kind of wraps up my question section, and I will move on strictly to the ranty spoiler parts. Hopefully these won't be too bad and won't be too long. I touched on it briefly in my dislikes, how I didn't really care for the connection with Paul and Veblen. Specifically looking at it, like, I understand they're both awkward people, but they were so stilted in some of their, like, they were just so stilted in some of their interactions. It made it really hard to get behind them as a couple. I also had problems with their communication skills. Again, I understand they're kind of an awkward phase, and I'm not really sure. Like, I'm glad they found each other because they can be awkward together, and they're kind of awkward in the same way and seem to understand each other. But just like the romance and the love didn't really seem to be there, and that made it really hard for me to get behind them as a romantic couple. But I did enjoy the aspect of their relationship where they were clearly friends on top of this, and I liked that part. Just the romance didn't seem to be there for me. There wasn't like sparking chemistry that you typically see with romances in contemporary novels. I hated Melanie's mother. I know it's written like you're supposed to hate her. I know. But I despise that woman so much. So much. I could not believe it. And I know you're supposed to hate her, and I know she's written in such a way to garner sympathy for Veblen, but honest to God, she was so overbearing and selfish, and just, I would not wish a mother like that on anyone, ever. Like, never in a million years would I want anybody to have to live through that. She just made me so angry. I hated her all the way through the book. At no point did she have any redeeming qualities. Like, I know at the end when she's like, they're talking, the doctor is supposed to be like, oh look, her mom's here to support her. Honestly, I think she was just showing off her medical knowledge because of her hypochondria. And I know maybe she loves her daughter, but I feel like she was definitely there, like, half for her daughter, half to get attention and show off. And it made me mad. Next, I'm going to talk quickly about Paul and Justin. And while I get Paul not really feeling connected to and jealous of Justin, I kind of wish that the relationship was a little bit less tenuous, because I feel like it would have been nice to have a little bit more of that brotherly love in there. But I totally get why it was written the way it was written. It was done that way because it was really trying to show Paul as kind of on the outside of his family. And they even talk about it, like Veblen mentions it at the end, and it's something I noticed when I was reading at the beginning. The parents refer to themselves and Justin as a tripod, especially after Paul left. It's kind of like, oh yeah, look, we're the three of us together are just kind of leaning on each other for support and keeping everything together. And it's like, that's nice that you're just completely disregarding one entire son. And when you go back with some of Paul's memories, you feel really terrible for him, because there's all of these things that he's doing that are so cool and so interesting. And his parents don't come to any of them, including this huge science fair that he was a part of as a child. Like, I was frustrated on Paul's behalf, while also hoping that he and Justin would come to terms with each other, just with and maybe get a better relationship. And it seems like that's gonna happen, but we'll see. And this leads me to the finale. Fin. Paul and Cloris's fallout. And I say this because they both fell out and then had physical issues. So Paul got hit by Cloris, broke a bunch of bones, had a small hemorrhage in his brain and some pressure, and they drained it, treated the brain, blah, 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 blah. They expected some but minimal brain damage to be evident. And then Paul woke up from his medically induced coma and had brain damage, so little brain damage, it was basically negligible, and he was a normal functioning human being. He had a little bit of amnesia around the accident, which is very typical, but I wish he'd had, slightly more than negligible brain damage, or say they had done a little arc where one of the paramedics he'd been training was on hand, and they used his own craniotomy device to kind of help, and let some fluid drain to keep the pressure from building. They could have done a few things, but instead they woke up and is actually 100% A-okay in the brain. I wish there had been more concrete and substantive results or consequences for this, but it was tidy, it was cute, it was happy. It's what you kind of expect with this kind of contemporary, I guess, where the kind of serious humor romance, you expect that kind of happy, tidy ending. However, for Cloris, it was, the entire situation with Cloris was a very, very much a commentary on the kind of person she was. She didn't pay enough attention to her son. She was violating a bunch of loopholes to get this craniotomy device mass produced, and it bit her in the butt because she wasn't paying attention to her son, and then he stabbed her with it in the head, and it caused a bunch of fluid from around the cushion of the brain to drain, and it resulted in some brain damage because of this, especially since it would have taken a little bit for her to get medical help, because her kid was so young, I don't know if he would have known to call, and even though she was on a video call with her ex, it would have been hard for him to get into contact with the authorities local to her. I get it, it's a commentary on her character, but why couldn't you have done a different route? Yeah, she's a lot of money, but have her go down with the ship, have her go down with the family company with this medical device, or have her get fired and kind of expelled from the family by her father, or have her get in trouble for hitting Paul with her car. There are so many things you could have done that would have felt a lot more realistic and a lot more relatable. But this is what was chosen. I'm sure some people will really like it. I personally just didn't. And that's all I have to say, and that's all I kind of wanted to talk and rant about with the spoilers, and I will see you guys in the next video at the beginning of August. See ya!